All right. And then because I get PowerPoint dependent, I'm going to throw that up. Okay, and of course it's all going to be on different screens, so I feel real bad that I might not be looking at you. So that's my problem, not yours. But I assume everybody can see the screen, that obligatory, everybody's seeing the little PowerPoint there. All right. So where this is coming from is the Center for Civic Ed has created a new scoring and evaluation rubric to help change, update, and piece the way the people program at that point. We are planning to use it in competition this year. So for those that are on here or watching later here, we are using it for competitions fall of 2024 and on, as the Center for Civic Ed has had this. But if you're not doing competition, I know there was a couple that expressed interest and wanted to see it and hear it, might just be using We the People in your classroom just as a tool, or just classroom-based hearings and such. Want to make sure that you're aware of kind of all of these updates and changes and everything there too. Use it as it works in your classroom there. There we go. So just kind of that idea. This was originally rolled out last fall. So kind of in that September, October timeframe. But by the time we got it last fall, by the time they gave us some tools to help with it, by the time the Center for Civic Ed did some trainings with it, those were not fully communicated to us and finished until after the Indiana regionals have started. So the Indiana Bar Foundation for the Indiana program made the intentional choice not to use it last year. But it was rolled out last year, at least nationally. So there were several states that did use it in their state competitions. It was used this past year at the national competition. So the national finals, the national invitational. So it's been rolled out there and starting to be used. So now that we are able to start this from the beginning with Indiana, we're coming back into this with it too. So I'm going to start this idea. It's new for Indiana teachers. We recognize that it's new for us as well. So I want to use this to give you, the teachers, the chance to know what we know with it, give you the idea of how we're planning to talk with teachers about it, how we're planning to talk with judges about it. And I want to get your feedback of things that you need to know, the judges need to know, and different aspects that way. So that's what we are really interested in. And we're going to kind of be in this together. So let us know how to help you, how to help the program, and go from there. Some of the rationales of why the Center for Civic Ed made this change, you're going to see that a lot of it, some of it comes from the attempt to address different challenges. Let me find my screen where I kind of wrote those down here. So challenges that the Center for Civic Ed found kind of across the board, whether we had it here a lot or not, but kind of across the board, things that they were thinking about were attempting to take a look at AI or adult-generated writing and try to be able to curb or minimize that. There was always a question of weight given to the opening statement versus the follow-up versus a holistic presentation. So some of those are addressed with this new rubric. Some of the scoring criteria on the old rubric had some ambiguities, one of which would be, for example, constitutional application. And especially as you were looking on some of those units, say 1 and 6, that were either pre-constitutional or extra-constitutional, that was hard to actually formulate or put into a category to score constitutional application. Another one, a better definition of participation within this as well. So those were some of the challenges and issues that they wanted to address with this new creation, new rubric here. It's a recognition that the simulated legislative hearing is an instructional tool that you can use. We use it to showcase what the students' knowledge is, their depth and breadth, their understanding in competition. And that's how we're able to evaluate score for competition. But truly in its classroom-based format, it's an instructional tool for you. It's an extra authentic assessment for you to use to bring on with that as well in your classroom. And I truly believe, after looking through this rubric, that it creates a stronger learning experience and a stronger educational experience. And looking at this, I probably wrote the same thing in 3 different words for those last 3 bullet points. Maybe because I true like after looking at this, looking at what this new rubric is set up to evaluate, it helps the educational experience. And so I hope you're going to see that along the way here too. So that's some of the rationale that's new here. So just as we see a little bit, this is what we were used to. This was the old rubric. It's been around for at least 15, 20 years that I've been around the We the People program. So it's been a steady piece there. The 6 criteria you have, what you're looking for, and the scoring and everything. The new rubric is going to look something like this. Let me at least pause for this point. I might change the formatting of this. So if you see it formatted differently, that's just because, for example, easier to kind of put our little sticker of who and what, which class and all those pieces, a tiebreaker box, things like that that we would want on there. So if the formatting looks different, please don't freak out with that. The content is going to be the same in there. These are going to be the things that we are looking for on this new rubric in pieces 2. Let me at least go over the similarities and differences at this point, and then I'm going to pause to see if anybody has any questions, comments, concerns along the way here too. So the biggest pieces that you'll find similarities and differences between that old and the new. The starting point, the big thing that should pop out is instead of 6 criteria, your new rubric only evaluates 5 different criteria. So the previous rubric, you're looking at the old ones: understanding, constitutional application, reasoning, supporting evidence, responsiveness, participation. That's what we were used to. The new rubric changes it to opening statement is an evaluated criteria, the evidence, the analysis and understanding, the application, and the discussion from the kids. Those are your 5 new criteria that we are looking to evaluate. Something that you will see as we pull out here, opening statement is its own criteria, which means those other evaluation criteria, those are being evaluated in the follow-up. So opening statement is its own criteria. The other parts, the other scored criteria are to be evaluated as part of the follow-up segment of the hearing. When we look at it, again, the same. Each are scored out of 10 points. What's different is then max of 50 versus a max of 60. What is the same is each criteria is weighted evenly, meaning we're not weighting any individual piece. It's just straight up add your 10s, you got a 50. We're not changing any of those weights of that, and that is the same as it was before. Just take your points, add them up, max of 60 at that point. So let me pause. Let me see if there's any questions, comments, feedback, anything at this point. As we keep going, I'm going to break down these 5 criteria as well, but I just want to give that pausing point at this point.
Thanks, Tim. I love the new rubric. I think this is really great. Since the points for the opening statement are its own category, what onus is on the students if the judges don't ask a question that falls in the other categories to kind of push that category?
I don't know. I don't know exactly how to answer that, in that as far as what is the onus of the students. I think where we are going to learn and what we need to keep hearing from you and what resources to provide the judges is how to make sure that they do ask questions that help them evaluate those other criteria. So I guess my initial reaction is I don't want to put more burden on students, but it's a realization of where you get points and how all this is going to come together if you're looking from that competition angle as well. So I'm happy to kind of keep talking through it, figuring out what might be the best way. But I think at this point, my answer is, what is the strategy to help build the judges' question bank to make sure they get answers to be able to evaluate each of those?
Yeah, because that's where I see the one potential limitation of it is we all know sometimes you end up going down a deep hole and then you don't always talk about some of the other angles. Well, if you didn't talk any today, application points might be very hard to get, but you have your evaluation and analysis. So that's the only concern I really have there.
Mhm. That's where I get that I think it is a much better educational structured piece. But I know you educators in the classroom also work on these types of viewpoints regularly, and the judges of the competition do not. So um, I think I keep coming back to what is the stuff that we need to provide to the judges to make sure it is still a good experience for all involved.
Thanks, Tim.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments, curiosities yet?
Well, Tim, thank you very much. My question is, and I'm sure you were sitting in with the judges training at the national finals. The scoring guide is quite intense. There's a lot going on. So is there an emphasis on, understanding that the kids really are not able to do all of these things in a limited amount of time? Like, what does that look like when the judges are trained?
Yeah. I guess to let you know, Liz, I was actually not in any of the judge trainings for nationals. Either was assigned to different places around the facility or different things. So I can tell you that CCE put out a kind of an overview judge training video that I have watched. It's about 30 minutes, and we're using that kind of as a blueprint to help us with our judge training. Um, yes, in the fact that there is a lot within each of that. And so I am interested in the idea of, again, the support that judges will need to understand that there is a spectrum of completeness within each of that and how they come together, and make that evaluation. Um, CCE has intentionally not provided guidance as to what is a 9, what is a 7, what is a 4. Um, in the fact that they have described judges in their experience at the national experience tend to norm themselves to their own what is the average, what is an above average, and how that plays to any variation of level, a regional level being different from a state level, being different from a national level. So again, it's the help and the idea of what guidance we need to provide the judges to understand how to evaluate application in the spectrum of a 1 to 10 score and how to get that information out there. Liz, I know I didn't answer your question. I guess I want to state that we realize it's an issue, and I'm open to thoughts, supports, resources, and any of the stuff that you might have experienced or seen that we can help the judges with it.
Yeah, sure. I'll point one out really quick. So, like, the first criteria for analysis understanding, it says students have accurately referenced key judicial decisions, amendments, historical context, or societal movements. So that's great. But then the first one for application, it says students have accurately addressed how a constitutional issue is currently assessed, including the legal framework, court interpretations, public policies, and prevailing arguments. So the rubric just implies that in order to score high on that, they would have to do all of them. So I think it's just maybe a consideration of going through each of those and maybe just changing an and to an or.
I'm with you on that. And I speaking for CCE, my gut tells me is that was their intention because they wanted to be able to showcase that there's not one right way to get to an answer. And so they were thinking it through of all those different ways, that court cases and presidential speeches and scholar books and all the stuff that you can use to be your supporting evidence piece. I don't think, while I understand that the word and means inclusive and all, my gut tells me that they didn't mean that. And I think or is the better conjunction there. And that can be something that either we figure out how to edit the PDF from there or stress that in judge training that it's not a collective. Those are options to build your argument or the students to build their argument.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the way I would go with that one. Any other thoughts, questions yet? All right. I'm going to break down those 5 elements a little bit on some of the ways that they are working with us or telling us to kind of help describe with it. So the opening statement, again, it's its own criteria. And our Indiana competitions, we are keeping the same timing as we would have typically seen. So at the regional level, it's going to be 4 and 6. At the state level, it will be 4 and 8 for the opening and the follow-ups. Just so you know that that's not changing. So the opening statement is going to be evaluated on its own. Again, those bullet points, and I know they look like check boxes, but the idea is also not necessarily check it off. An idea, I think that would be one of the things they could have changed and such there, but it's the idea that those are just things to be addressed, not necessarily a checkbox of completeness, the spectrum of to be addressed. Kind of to your point, Liz, there, just kind of the holistic argument behind it. Looking at the opening statement to be as fully addressed to that question as possible. The students all participating, the well-supported argument, all those pieces, and getting a score for the opening. That's being scored out of 10. From there, again, you move to the other criteria that are going to be evaluated based on the follow-up portion of the hearing. So the evidence part scored during the follow-up. The idea that we are told is that these should be new facts that they are building in with this as well. So it's not just rehashing what they've said, but they're able to showcase that through the question process, they do have more evidence to be able to showcase. And so, excuse me, they are looking for examples, historic, contemporary information, more data, kind of the idea, they use the phrase, what does the document say? What does the quote say? What does that mean in pieces? Like adding those in there to be a part of that. So that's a piece of the evidence that they're looking for. The support that they've created, at least to start off with, builds on a lot of the Bloom taxonomy verbs and questions that come from it. So as you're looking at this, and just for the record, these columns aren't necessarily horizontally based, but to take a look at verbs. So as a judge thinks about it, which kind of verbs would they use in their question, and then possible starting question stems. So these are a few examples that they gave us, that they gave the judges at the national competition, that will be able to support that. Again, as one of those pieces, Andrew, back to maybe part of what you were asking about previously, the idea of how to help the judge ask a question that should elicit an answer to evaluate evidence using these types of things. Pause, questions, comments at this point? Cool. Next one, the analysis and understanding. Again, you're moving up the Bloom's, the idea there, the different things that you're looking to evaluate. Again, scored based on the analysis based on the follow-up portion of the hearing. This is supposed to start taking a look at that depth of the student understanding, that they're thinking, their critical evaluation, the complex understanding of what's going on. Kind of a thought phrase that they've used is, what does the document or source mean and according to whom? So as you think about that, again, you see the pull out of the things that is on the rubric that the judges are going to be thinking about with it. And again, we'll train the judges, talk to the judges that it is a spectrum, that they're to understand and think through how all this is done in a complete manner or not, and score based on that out of the score of 10. Again, they offer up some additional verbs and question stems that can be used that we can provide to the judges to help them gauge how to ask an analysis question So again, the different verbs, the different starts of the question stems that we have there too. So we have that. Any other, I know I keep kind of pausing, but I want to make sure if any other thoughts, questions.
Tim, real quick, one of the things I had a question about just in your thought. One thing that we used to do in the past more would be to try to get through a few more questions. So like if kids kind of gave a good solid answer with something that we felt like there was not much more to kind of expand on to move on. But do you think now with all of this, especially with like this analysis part, and you kind of look at, seeing all the different viewpoints, is it better to have every kid respond to each question then at this point, as long as they're providing something new and a different perspective or a different take on something?
I don't, if you don't mind, let me pause on that.
Yeah,
Let
yeah,
me
no
kind of
problem.
think as I talk, and especially as we get back to the last criteria about the participate or discussion. And maybe I think we can fill in with that. I don't think there's going to be a right way or a wrong way. I think they're more looking for, again, complete answers, thoughtful answers, and going from the discussion aspect more than how much participation.
Sure.
So we can kind of go through that, and maybe especially as we look through that discussion, something might come out as we kind of look and to think through that there.
Okay.
Again, the application part during the follow-up segment. This is not the depth, but more of the breadth of the student's understanding, how to apply something historical to something current, from something theoretical to something practical. How do we build that? What's the application piece within it? Again, you'll see the pieces that are listed that on the scoring rubric, a little bit on the bottom of the screen there, of what judges are going to be asked to look for, and pieces there. Again, the question stems, the question verbs are going to be available for them as well to be able to use. So we'll have that for all the judges as well. And so I guess I'll pause there again before we get into discussion. Again, educators, I know you are used to those verbs, those kind of question stems, and that thought process. We're going to help try to build that out to the judges to help them be better at asking those questions, to be able to draw that evaluation piece there too. The discussion, this is where we're kind of taking over instead of necessarily straight participation. While participation is still a part of it, they're looking for substantive discussion is more of the guiding principle behind this. Again, scored during the follow-up segment. How substantive was it? Did the students build on their arguments? Did they support their arguments? Was there a civility aspect? Was the conversation aspect there? Those are the things that they're going to look for. One of the parts that I want to emphasize is on the part there that the students connected the follow-up to their opening statement to further elaborate on the ideals and arguments presented. I want to stress that that is not always necessary to expand and elaborate in the same way. But I also want to stress that I think the important part is the recognition of counter arguments to be able to strengthen their initial argument as well. I think that's the important part, where we're going to note a lot of those counter arguments, or I disagree with my colleague type of statements, to be able to show the depth of thinking and the depth of conversation, the depth of discussion, as you can pull that together there. So I think those types of things, the counter arguments, that it's not, that line to me doesn't necessarily mean promoting the same argument, but it can with the recognition of the counter argument. So I want to throw that in there. As far as the counter argument, I think also adds to the understanding piece of it. It can add to an application piece of it, and it can add to the discussion piece of it. Because as we know, these questions are not straightforward, they're not easy answered, and there are multiple counter arguments to the way you can do this. So I think that's where a way we can make sure we can stress and add that part in there too. So I'll pause again. Tony, your answer, your question about how much should somebody speak or add more in, I think at that point you're going to kind of get your own feel. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think if there's a way to substantively add to the discussion, it works. If there's a way to showcase that they have another piece of evidence that they haven't talked about, another way to showcase their connection and application to, the history to contemporary or whatever you've got there. Back to your point, if they're adding value, they're adding, value to it. And I don't think that's necessarily changing. Is there any other thoughts, questions about this? I mean, kind of my last slide then is just, what are your concerns? Do you have questions? As you're looking through this, again, we want to make sure that you, the educator in the classroom, feels comfortable, confident with this. Again, I think this is a better benefit for the teaching aspect behind it. But we know this is going to be different for competition. So what do you need? What do you think is important that our judges have as we start building that out, as we are planning through and thinking through those supports leading into competition? So kind of an open time frame at this point. Your thoughts, your concerns, your excitement. What do you need? What do judges need, and other stakeholders and stuff? And I'll shut up now.
I thought it was great. Thank you, Tim. And that applause is for the presentation, not for you shutting up.
Either way. I mean, you know how to reach us, and we know that there will be people watching this video later on and they might have questions. So again, please don't hesitate to call, email, whatever you need there. Happy to have the discussion. I think it's going to help us as we go into the competition. We want to be able to make sure that is set up for success. And then especially for those that aren't using competition and just in your classroom, the educational value of We the People that we all really enjoy. I think this also helps in an evaluation and assessment piece there too. So from there, I'll do one more pause to see if there's any thoughts, questions, or anything I can help you with today. Otherwise, keep me updated if you think of anything else along the way.
Thank you, Tim.
Cool. Appreciate your time. Let us know what you need.
Will do. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.